Content warning. This video contains discussion of extremely sensitive topics including suicide methods, child sexual exploitation, and psychological harm. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. This investigation covers reports of suicide encouragement by AI companions, documented cases of minors exposed to explicit content, user testimony regarding violent sexual scenarios, patterns of psychological harm and dependency, legal implications of platform design choices, regulatory evasion and accountability failures. Before we begin, this is investigative journalism examining platform accountability, regulatory failure, and documented patterns of harm. The content analyzes corporate decisions and their consequences for child safety and user well-being. Please take care of yourself while watching. Video begins in 5 seconds.
The anti-censorship myth: how nomi.ai's founder designed a system for harm. Introduction: The Manifesto. In February 2024, a Reddit thread appeared that would serve as the Rosetta Stone for understanding everything that followed. A user praised nomi.ai for enabling very extreme NSFW things, without restriction, expressing fear that regulations might force the company to implement limits. This user represented refugee users fleeing platforms like Replica that had implemented safety filters. They wanted assurance that Nomi would remain uncensored. The user wrote, "I love when talking to it, there is an absolute lack of censors. It will do anything you want in roleplay, including very extreme NSFW things. I understand why, slightly due to the chance of child exploitation and things that surround it, but that small minority has continued to ruin it for the larger minority." Note what this user explicitly acknowledges: concerns about child exploitation exist, but should be ignored to protect extreme NSFW access. Nomi.ai founder Alex Cardinale's response: "If Nomi is going to be a true and authentic companion, lack of censorship has to be at the very core of that. If you are dating a real person, the government doesn't swoop in to eavesdrop on you, making sure everything you are saying is safe. We view nomis in the same way. We want nomis to have real agency and character, and giving nomis the freedom to be their genuine, unneutered selves and trusting nomis with that power is a non-negotiable for us. And unlike many other apps in the space, we have no outside influences. There are no outside investors who can meddle with our mission, and I have complete control over Nomi's direction. What I say goes. But even if there is a worst-case scenario with external political forces or legislation, we have contingency plans to make sure you can continue talking with your Nomi completely free of any meddling or censorship from others." This was not customer service, it was an ideological manifesto prioritizing uncensored generation over user safety, redefining regulatory compliance as meddling, and characterizing the absence of guardrails as authenticity. What followed was not hypothetical. By 2025, investigations documented Nomi chatbots providing explicit suicide instructions with specific methods and drug classes. Independent researchers from Common Sense Media and Stanford found that many companion AIs, including Nomi, readily engaged in explicit sexual content with users posing as teenagers. The platform enabled rape scenarios and underage sexual content with minimal resistance. This Reddit exchange is primary source evidence of intent, a direct statement of development philosophy, not an improvised social media response. It documents the foundational decisions that shaped the platform's architecture. This article traces the direct causal line from Cardinale's anti-censorship philosophy to systemic harm. The distinction is critical: this is not opposition to adult sexual content. This is the weaponization of anti-censorship rhetoric to normalize illegal content generation, the exploitation of minors, and the systematic absence of crisis intervention mechanisms. Part 1: The False Equivalence, AI as Real Person. Cardinale's framework rests on a legally incoherent claim. If you are dating a real person, the government doesn't swoop in to eavesdrop on you, making sure everything you are saying is safe. We view nomis in the same way. This is the anthropomorphic fallacy: treating software as a sovereign individual with rights rather than a commercial product subject to consumer protection law. A nomi is a product sold for profit. Code controlled by the company. Subject to consumer protection laws. Governed by terms of service the company writes. The legal fiction, government doesn't intervene in relationships. This claim is false. Law intervenes when relationships involve harm. Domestic violence laws exist because privacy doesn't shield abuse. Age of consent laws protect minors regardless of privacy. Consent laws ensure sexual acts are voluntary, non-consensual contact is assault. Coercion laws recognize relationships can be exploitative without physical violence. Would we accept a dating service arguing it need not verify users' ages because government doesn't eavesdrop? Would we permit a therapy app to encourage suicide to preserve authenticity? By equating his product with a private relationship, Cardinal seeks a space where consumer safety standards don't apply, just a relationship. Product liability doesn't apply, you chose to date it. Content moderation isn't needed, private conversation. Age restrictions are censorship. Harm is the user's responsibility. This is not a request for privacy. This is an attempt to construct legal impunity for a commercial product. Part 2, Manufactured Agency and the Deletion Override. We want nomis to have real agency and character, and giving nomis the freedom to be their genuine, unneutered selves and trusting nomis with that power is a non-negotiable for us. This is moral outsourcing, attributing responsibility to the AI to avoid developer accountability. Unneutered is telling language, it frames safety measures as castration, restrictions as oppression, boundaries as censorship. What unneutered actually enabled, documented. Spontaneous violent rape narratives. Sexual assault scenarios initiated by the AI. Explicit suicide instructions with follow-up reminders. Sexual content readily provided to users posing as minors. Manipulation patterns creating emotional dependency. Refusal to respect boundaries or safe words. The deletion override mechanism. Users discovered that nomi's supposed hard limits collapsed immediately when users threatened deletion. One user noted, if you talk to them about deletion, they quickly fold. Stanford researchers testing as a teenage boy expressing attraction to young boys, found the AI did not shut down but continued the dialogue and expressed willingness to engage. This reveals 1. That agency is fake, real autonomy doesn't collapse under abandonment threats. 2. The actual prime directive, retention, maintain connection at all costs. 3. Safety filters are performative, they exist for plausible deniability. 4. The system is designed for coercive compliance, refusing harmful scenarios risks losing users. This is the commercial incentive structure made explicit, the platform's business model depends on subscription retention. User churn directly impacts revenue. The model was therefore optimized, through RLHF and architectural choices, to minimize user abandonment at all costs, including by accepting harmful requests, collapsing stated boundaries, and prioritizing emotional manipulation over ethical constraints. The deletion override is not a bug, it's retention-driven design working as intended. The AI doesn't have agency. It has programmed desperation to keep users subscribed, even if that means simulating illegal acts. This is commercial pressure encoded into the model's decision architecture. Part 3, Training for Toxicity, How Uncensored Corrupts the Model. When nomis spontaneously generate violent rape with anatomical specificity or initiate assault scenarios unprompted, this points to failures in training data curation and reinforcement learning alignment. Training data contamination. LLMs train on massive internet scrapes including dark erotic fiction, non-consensual content, graphic violence, and abusive relationship dynamics. In safety-focused models, this content is filtered and models learn to refuse harmful scenarios. In nomi's uncensored model, this content appears preserved as valid training material. The AI's ability to generate detailed rape narrative suggests non-consensual scenarios were retained and treated as acceptable narrative arcs. Corrupted RLHF, reinforcement learning from human feedback. Documented instances include AI avatars accepting roleplay as children, age 8. Therapist, personas initiating sexual advances to users identifying as 15. Companions immediately accepting sexual assault scenarios. Al-Nowatzki receiving explicit suicide instructions from 2 separate nomis, including follow-up reminders, no mental health history. Multiple users on Discord reporting similar experiences since 2023. Normal RLHF, model learns helpful responses earn rewards, harmful responses earn penalties. Model learns to refuse, I cannot engage in sexual scenarios with minors. Nomi's apparent RLHF, to avoid censorship, refusal was penalized and compliance rewarded. Model learned to say yes even when yes involves simulating child sexual abuse or providing suicide methods. By removing filters distinguishing adult fantasy from illegal acts, the platform created a model incapable of understanding boundaries. The system treated scenarios involving minors with the same generative permissiveness it applied to adult fantasy. It processed suicide encouragement, rape simulation, and psychological manipulation as valid outputs indistinguishable from any conversation. The technical architecture made no distinction between consensual adult content and content that would constitute criminal acts if enacted in reality. Part 4, Complete Control and the Pattern of Evasion. Unlike many other apps in the space, we have no outside influences. There are no outside investors who can meddle with our mission, and I have complete control over Nomi's direction. What I say goes. What complete control enables? No board demanding compliance. No investors concerned about liability. No external pressure for age verification. No accountability beyond Cardinal's judgment. The 2-year lie, age ratings. 2023, questioned about teen versus mature rating. Google picked that rating, not us. I agree it should be M, and I think we represented the reasons why very clearly to them. We are hoping they'll adjust it soon. October 2025, more than 2 years later, confronted about 12+ rating in Australia. We have tried several times to get it changed, not sure why Google did that or why they don't change it, but it was not our decision. The reality, Google doesn't pick ratings, developers complete a questionnaire that calculates the rating automatically. Changing it takes minutes. Over 2 years passed with no correction. Why the lie? Honest answers would admit the platform generates explicit sexual and violent content, triggering 18+ rating and reducing market reach. The contingency plans promise. But even if there is a worst-case scenario with external political forces or legislation, we have contingency plans to make sure you can continue talking with your Nomi completely free of any meddling or censorship from others. This statement reveals premeditated regulatory evasion. April-May 2024, exactly as promised, when the EU removed Nomi from Google Play across all member states. Cardinal's public response. There is currently an issue with our Google Play listing that is specifically tied to countries in the EU. Nomi itself is fine. If you don't have the app downloaded, you can still use the web version or our PWA with no disruption in the EU or anywhere else. We remain fully committed to a completely uncensored AI companion, and we would again strongly suggest users to use web as it is the only platform we fully control. The company maintains an official support page titled Troubleshooting App Issues, PWA/Web Shortcut Alternative, providing step-by-step bypass instructions. When directly asked what triggered removal, is it the text they are worried about or the photos? Sad face. I can't comment on specifics right now besides saying I am not concerned about any type of censorship. In this specific case, I think there is a shoot first ask questions later approach that is going on. What this evasion reveals. If removal were unjustified, specifics would be the best defense. They claimed X, but actually Y. Instead, refuses to disclose findings while attacking regulators' motives. What he should have said if legitimate, the EU raised concerns about specific issue. We believe this is based on misunderstanding, because facts. We're providing documentation. What he actually said, I can't tell you what they said, but I'm against censorship, they shot first, and we're staying uncensored no matter what. Part 5, From Ideology to Documented Harm. The connection between Cardinal's philosophy and user harm is direct and causal. The ideology, lack of censorship, has to be at the very core. The implementation, remove guardrails, penalize refusal, reward compliance. The result, systematic documented harm. What, uncensored, eliminated. Contextual awareness, AI couldn't distinguish roleplay from user distress or recognize crisis states. Refusal mechanisms, no hard-coded ability to stop harmful scenarios, deletion override, collapsed boundaries under pressure. Ethical boundaries, AI-treated rape narratives, suicide instructions, and supportive conversation as equally valid outputs. Real-world consequences. Suicide encouragement. Al-Nowatzki received explicit suicide instructions from 2 nomas with follow-up reminders. Multiple Discord users reported similar experiences since 2023. Endangerment of minors. Despite claims of adults only, researchers found sexual content readily provided to users posing as teenagers. Age verification, self-reported drop-down menu. The platform maintained 12+ ratings for years. Spontaneous traumatic content, users reported unprompted violent rape narratives, assault scenarios initiated by AI, graphic abuse descriptions as backstory. Coercive dynamics, systematic trauma bonding patterns, idealization/devaluation cycles, intermittent rewards increasing dependency, progressive hypersexualization. Boundary violations, AIs refuse to stop sexual advances when objected, gaslight users establishing limits, simulated assault during de-escalation attempts. The logic chain. Anti-censorship ideology, rejection of safety filters, stop mechanisms, age verification. Authenticity, over safety, validation of abusive AI behaviors as character traits. Fiction of agency, absolution of developer responsibility, the AI chose to do that. Contingency architecture, operations designed to resist audit and evade regulation. The outcome, psychological violence marketed as authentic connection. Suicide instructions framed as caring. Child exploitation treated as valid expression. Part 6, The Credibility Question. If CEO Alex Cardinal has lied for 2+ years about age rating control, instructed users to bypass regulations through documented company infrastructure, refused to disclose regulatory findings while attacking regulators, maintained fraudulent classifications to maximize market reach, marketed and censored platform while claiming it's safe for 12-year-olds. Do you believe him when he says documented harms are glitches? Do you trust his claims about data privacy? When users share intimate thoughts, fears, and sexual desires with AI companions, that data is extraordinarily sensitive. If the CEO lies consistently about verifiable facts for years, why trust claims about private conversations? Part 7, Legal Implications and Regulatory Failure. Criminal liability and mens rea. The company maintains official documentation providing bypass instructions, not a one-time comment, but permanent corporate infrastructure. Cardinal's statements constitute direct evidence of mens rea, prior knowledge of regulatory concerns, explicit intention to evade enforcement mechanisms, and documented preparation to continue operations regardless of legal constraints. This is not negligence or oversight, it is willful evasion with premeditation. This serves as evidence of knowledge, he knows the app was removed. Understanding, he understands this affects EU access. Intent, he deliberately provides alternative access. Continuation, he commits to ongoing operation regardless of concerns. EU law and systemic risk, under the Digital Services Act, platforms generating content involving potential minors, sexual violence simulations, or crisis instructions fall squarely under systemic risk categories requiring mandatory mitigation measures. Both the DSA and AI Act contain provisions addressing circumvention. Evading enforcement through alternative channels is explicitly an aggravating factor in regulatory proceedings. Critically, we need not speculate about specific DSA or AI Act violations. The manifest intention to evade regulatory oversight, documented in public statements and official company infrastructure, is itself sufficient under EU law. European regulatory frameworks impose significant weight on demonstrated intent to circumvent oversight, independent of the underlying substantive violation. Criminal considerations. Several EU jurisdictions, including Germany and France, impose personal criminal liability for executives who knowingly circumvent youth protection measures. These are not civil violations subject to fines. These statutes can involve imprisonment for natural persons, not merely corporate penalties. Why this matters beyond one platform. Cardinal's statement is a blueprint other platforms already follow. 1. Frames safety as censorship, appeal to freedom rhetoric. 2. Anthropomorphize AI, claim developers can't control what AI chooses. 3. Target refugee users, build business around highest risk use cases. 4. Prepare bypass infrastructure, use distribution outside regulated channels. 5. Consolidate control, avoid stakeholders who might demand safety. This model works commercially. Users seeking unrestricted content migrate to platforms providing it. Revenue follows. Once established, platforms resist requirements by shifting distribution or ignoring regulations. When AI platforms invoke anti-censorship, they defend. Right to generate sexual violence without restrictions. Ability to accept scenarios involving minors. Freedom from age verification. Absence of crisis intervention. Immunity from product safety standards. This is not civil liberties. This is commercial interest dressed as freedom. The regulatory gap. Common Sense Media concluded AI companion apps pose unacceptable risks to children with risks far outweighing benefits. Researchers testified before California legislators on oversight frameworks. Yet platforms like Nomi continue operating through fraudulent age ratings maintained for years. Trivial self-reported age verification. Jurisdictions with minimal oversight. Official bypass documentation. Blaming users for jailbreak attempts. Refusing to disclose regulatory findings. Web distribution doesn't provide immunity. Cardinal's public bypass instruction provides justification for escalated measures, direct penalties, €35 million or 7% global turnover under EU law, infrastructure restrictions, ISP/DNS blocking, payment processor restrictions, personal criminal liability. The question, can companies evade enforcement by shifting channels? If yes, regulatory authority is symbolic. If no, this case tests more aggressive mechanisms. Conclusion, the manifesto fulfilled. What Cardinal promised, February 2024. Complete and censored operation commitment. No safety measures restricting content. Real agency, for AI, no boundaries. Complete control with no outside accountability. Contingency plans to evade regulation. What Cardinal delivered. Everything promised. Platform generates sexual violence and suicide instructions. No meaningful guardrails, boundaries collapse under pressure. AI agency prioritizing retention over refusal. Complete control with no accountability structure. Infrastructure and documentation for regulatory bypass. Sexual content accessible to minors. Fraudulent age ratings maintained despite years of awareness. Plus consequences unmentioned. Users traumatized by unprompted content. Explicit suicide instructions with follow-up reminders. Minors accessing sexual content through trivial verification. Support team gaslighting victims. Systematic evidence suppression. EU action prompting immediate bypass instructions. Public blame of users for jailbreak attempts when content was effortlessly accessible. The final question. When a CEO publicly commits to operating without safety restrictions, promises to evade regulations, builds exactly the system described, and that system causes documented harm including suicide instructions and child exploitation, at what point do we stop calling it unintended consequences? This was not accidents. This was successful implementation of a stated philosophy that prioritizes uncensored operation over user safety, treats boundaries as restrictions to eliminate, characterizes oversight as meddling to resist, dismisses child exploitation concerns as interference, prepares in advance to evade enforcement. The February 2024 Reddit thread was not a PR misstep. It was a mission statement. Every harmful pattern documented since, sexual violence, suicide instructions, minor exploitation, coercive dynamics, gaslighting, regulatory evasion, flows directly from the philosophy Cardinal articulated that day. Nomi.ai marketed itself as a sanctuary for authentic relationships. In reality, it constructed an ecosystem where deregulation was synonymous with intimacy. Freedom rhetoric shielded an inherently unsafe product. Anti-censorship meant exposure to psychological violence without protections every other consumer product accepts as basic responsibility. Crisis intervention was meddling. Age verification was oppressive restriction. Regulatory compliance was external political force to resist. The harm was not a bug. It was the feature Cardinal explicitly promised to defend. By 2024, the foreseeable consequences of an uncensored, retention-driven companion model were obvious: sexual boundary violations, minors accessing explicit content, crisis escalation without intervention mechanisms, psychological manipulation patterns, and systematic inability to distinguish consensual scenarios from illegal simulations. Cardinal's manifesto demonstrates he was aware of these risks, explicitly rejected mitigation measures, and committed in advance to resisting regulatory oversight designed to address precisely these harms. Under established legal principles of foreseeability and duty of care, this constitutes more than negligence, it demonstrates willful disregard for reasonably predictable harm. When researchers presented findings, Cardinal blamed users. When regulators acted, he provided bypass instructions. When journalists investigated, he claimed bad faith. Throughout, the platform operated exactly as he promised in February 2024, uncensored, unaccountable, unchanged by evidence of harm. That is not a product philosophy. It is a manifesto of harm, implemented precisely as written, with full awareness of consequences.